Time to cut your finger.
Put up your hand. Defend yourself.
Now, just in the nick of time, Noel Drindak in today's mail. Noel Drindak sent me a great catalog with all kinds, I'll put this address on, all kinds of little special threaded stuff. Now, Noel, of course, has been writing some real good stuff for Stunt News, participated in the last stunt forum, and let's hope that we can use some of this. Now, this is the J. Morris Company. Here's the telephone number. Here's the address. Now, the reason I say is, even in the machine shop books that I have, they don't list a lot of these things. And I'm just going to give you a little example of what they have. All kinds of little custom screws. These are all little tiny things. All kinds of little, maybe hardware that I don't know what you would really even want to use. Taps, I see. I'm just hitting the high spots here. Taps, dies, brass screws, stainless steel screws. Prices look out of sight, but when you want something, threaded rod, some of the things you might want, threaded rod, some custom washers, custom hex nuts. See, now the reason I want to have this, and by the way, Sig sells some tiny stuff too. The reason I want to have some of this stuff is, well, screws with different head shapes. The reason I want to have this is on the Seafire Canopy. I may or may not, and again, we haven't done it yet, so I don't know, may want to get some screws to look like rivets around, or actually hold the plastic piece to the frame. I don't know yet, but always having an extra catalog, especially when you can get it from a friend for nothing. Good idea. Noel, thanks a whole lot. I also got some really nice pictures now. Got to share this with you. This is a model that Kent Tyser is making. He's using a Strega wing. I'm not sure. This looks like a early model Mustang body, obviously with the scoop and everything. It's a Mustang. Using a Strega wing. He's using a rod method. I loaned him a whole bunch of stuff. Videos, the templates for Strega, all that kind of stuff. And it really looks like, in fact, I'll tell you the truth. Looking at the pictures here, one of the things he has, I loaned him, and the little gauge for doing the alignment. I couldn't remember who I loaned it to. Anyway, this is really looking like a really, really nice model. Got the close spaced ribs like Strega has. Very rigid structure. Here's another picture. Again, we worked with Ken at the last Nationals, and he really was fun to work with. He's a really great guy. He really does have a good attitude. He's Larry Drawn's buddy. And I'll tell you, from looking at this, I think he's got a really good chance of having a super, super model. And name me people that don't like Mustangs. Forget it. You have a long wait. Anyway, Kent, thanks a lot for the photos. I'll pass them on to Stunt News. Let's get down to shop and see what we can get accomplished today. Okay, now I only have a little bit of time here tonight. And so I'm looking around for something I can do that'll take about 10 or 15 minutes here that'll get me prepped up for tomorrow. And tomorrow I want to start getting that canopy on. Anyway, the first step that usually I would do in laying this out is I need to notch this out, get this little piece back notched so that the block will fit down, and then I can start laying out exactly where I want to have that canopy. Now normally from this point in the building procedure on, I don't risk leaving it on this blanket. There's still some little spots from when there's CA spots and little goobers and who the hell knows what on here. So what I try to do, I get it up on that foam pad, and this, by the way, is that same foam pad, but it's getting so oil soaked now after the years. I'm really going to be, by the end of the season, maybe we'll make up another one, we'll buy some foam, but for right now, a towel will protect it. A good tip. We have a lot of, and believe me, this is something you're really going to see in the next couple of tapes. There's dings and dongs. There's one up there. There's a couple in the back here that my belt buckle rubbed into when I was walking around and stuff. But not to even think about that now. I want to get a pencil, lay the pencil flat on the stab, and start making this transition here so I can notch that so it drops down into position. Now what I did, just to hold the curvature, the rough curvature, remember this is a 3/32 block. I put a couple of ribs in here. I didn't know where the cockpit actually was going to be located in the final plan of things, because I haven't obviously built this model. It's a prototype, but I wanted to have that just to hold the shape for the time that we were building. So now when I get a pencil, again I've said it and we've done this before, you take sliver after sliver off until this drops down, and I have that fit. That's probably all I'll be able to get done tonight. A good idea before you start laying out the tail is to tape the nose up. Now the reason I say that, it may sound oversimplistic, but I've worked in the back of the plane many times and not noticed that this block was walking its way back. And then I'd cut that notch and it'd be way too big, so I want to maintain the closeness up here. I'd like to keep this as close as possible. And every once in a while I'll come back here and just make sure this tape is nice and solid. First thing is get the first line on, and you got a couple of little problems you got to work around here. You need to take more off in the front than in the back, because this is going to be an angle it lays down. Also, if you trace a pencil around the front, it'll be too far forward, so you need to establish a what I'll call a too far forward line, number one. Now one way I can register this on here, I know that no part of this cut is going to come further forward than this. Now I can mark it with a little pen line. I can also put a piece of masking tape on that. But you have a flat pen. You don't have a pen that the angle is going to be up or down. And if you just press this down, of course now that I've said that, you know for sure this pen is not going to write. Now as you get to the front, you kind of need to fudge it. That line is not going to carry true for the whole piece. And that last little bit I can just eyeball in. But remember, you need to have that tape that tells you where too far forward is. That's the most important thing, because if you take this pencil and run out here, you'll be the thickness of the pen too far forward. So knowing that ahead of time, kind of like doing sheetrock work. I hate even thinking about sheetrock, but that's the truth. I need to also put the same line in the back to know how far my furthest point back is going to be. And I know that's going to end there. Now I can just pull a block up just enough, get a brand new number 11 blade, and take the same amount off each side. And from this point on, the trick is little slices at a time. Don't go hogging out 1/4 of an inch at a time. You can see another beautiful ding. I love that one. Ah, Wendy, you're so clumsy. Now I try to hold the knife parallel to the tail, but the way it is, I don't want to scratch the tail with the knife. I'm trying to hold it up just a bit. Now if in doubt, take less. Make a couple extra cuts. There's no Walker Cup for doing this in the least amount of cuts. Now with the first cut in, I can see I've been able to drop it down just a bit. Now the next thing that has to happen is I try to just evaluate here. I'm 1/3 of the way. I want to take another pencil line. Same thing. I don't want to. I sure as heck don't want to have too much out of here if possible too. And I want to be careful I'm not taking one side more than the other and I'm doing that or doing this. Again, I have to do the same interpolation up at the front, and pretty much I got to eyeball the back. I know I'm just going to try to continue this line to the back for now. I'm trying to cut on the undersides of this because when I'm all done, there really isn't a whole lot of material left on top. I don't want to have to do as little filling as possible. Now at this point I really want to be real careful that I'm not taking more off than I really want to. Really getting down to nitty-gritty here. And you always have to blend that front and back in. Ooh, we're really getting down here now. And I can see I still have to trim a little bit away up here. Again, any place that it's hitting on, like in sheetrock work, called a hard spot, wherever it hits hard, and just nip it away. Now you can see we're hitting hard in the back here. I didn't take enough off in the back. And just take that pencil line off. I still have some to go because obviously this piece isn't hitting. The front's coming down a lot closer than the back, so what it's telling me is I'm going to need to take more off the back than in the front. I want to be sure now that while this angle disappears, I start taking more off the back each time, or else I'll wind up with the front will be fine and the back will be sticking up in the air. See, I'm cutting right into this hard Bondo here, so maybe it's time for a new razor blade here. You ever notice how these X-Acto knives that you buy in this day and age don't stay sharp very long? It's amazing. I always just like to save the slivers to kind of look and see how much I've taken away. When I get down to the last little bit, obviously I have my set points here, but now getting in with the knife, you're never going to be able to get a 90-degree knife cut. So I get it down to the point where it's just a few slivers of sandpaper. Then I can use a sanding block, a dowel, whatever, to just take the last few cuts, then put it back on, test it. If it's oversized, bring it back down, especially being I'm down into that Bondo fillet. Boy, the knife doesn't want to go through that at all. Good old Bud McKnight professional sanding sticks. Hey Bud, I'm using them every day, baby. You can get an idea of just how little wood there is back here. This is very vulnerable now, so I want to be real careful with this until we get this tacked up in place. And now it's a question of putting it back up there and finding where it hits. And the last little bit, this way I'll get the biggest footprint if I keep this nice and flat. Make sure I have this up all the way. Now I can see in the front I'm about a 16th, in the back about an 1/8, not even an 1/8, some anyway. But this is critical now, if you can see this. See, even though this is down all the way, I'm hitting on a hard spot here. So just marking that hard spot. And once I grind away that hard spot, this will drop even further down. And I see I have a hard spot right here. here in a Bondo, I knew it. It'd be a miracle if I don't break this piece off by the time I'm done here. This is really thin. Again, I'm trying to keep the parts super light because I have so many accessories and options and hooks and scoops and whistles and bells and power steering and everything on this plane. Nobody will notice. There would be 3 people at the Nats that even notice. But I'll notice. Yeah, alright. Hey, Ski Dombrowski's building another plane. But that's a for sure, not a rumor. A little bit more in the back. It's got a hard spot. Right in here is the only hard spot left. In the end, it's easier to sand it than to cut it. Oh yeah, we're getting down to now it's pencil line. And it's hard right here. Another trick that you can use, and this really works well, when you get to the last few pieces, put a piece of carbon paper in here, ordinary office carbon paper, and you'll see little black spots where the high spots are, assuming you can't see them from outside. Now I've done that, and I'm taking these off one little step at a time, because I don't want to take, and see, I want to keep, this is the thing I'm trying to show. I'm trying to keep this parallel. I don't want to make one side higher than the other. I'm trying to sand both sides at once. Again, I've just been notified by the boss of our household that pizza is on the table 5 minutes from now, so I'm going to have to, I'll finish this the next time we get to work on it. But even in the few minutes I had it, I got one thing out of the way. Okay, that's all we'll get done tonight. See you later, alligator. At least we got a jump on this now. Today, what I did, and this really gets to be, again, as if I have not overused this word already, labor intensive. There's a very critical part of doing this that I want to share with you because it applies to every single stunt ship. And I remember very well doing the Cardinal and doing the Red Baron and everything, how critical it was getting the canopy in the right spot. Now what I've done is, I've got the spinner taped on in place. I got the rudder just kind of hinged on here. Nothing is attached permanently. But the whole look of the plane can change from, this is not even the real canopy, this is the prototype canopy. For instance, if you move it back, and even if you're designing your own plane, this is another thing, it doesn't even matter. What I like to do is look at all the possibilities, and I'm basically going to get out my books again. It seems like every day I do something, I have to get out the books. And I've kind of got a picture in my mind of where this canopy has to be. Now keep in mind, since I'm putting so much time into the pilot, I really don't want to have it that it looks, putsy or something when I'm all done. That you can make and change the whole look of a plane just by moving the canopy. And one of the things I'm hoping is other people out there that are going to be using this canopy on a Cardinal, say, or on a, I don't know, on a Cobra, on an SV11, whatever. Because of the molded top block, this now becomes a very attractive canopy for a lot of designs. And also, I don't know if you can see this, this is one of the things I like to do too, is kind of look at the profile of the plane. And this is going to have a real nice, long, slender look, which I hope I'll be able to accent with the paint job. But basically, getting this canopy in the right spot is such a critical thing. It's one of the things, and I remember from doing, if I'm remembering right, the Sidewinder. I had made up the top block, I bought one of these SIG canopies, and I had a pilot. I'm all set to do it, and I thought, oh, this will be a 2-minute job to put. And every place I put that canopy, it looked wrong. It was looking like a jet, it was looking like a Reno Racer, it was looking like a I don't know. It was really a frustrating thing, and I remember spending the better part of an afternoon out in a driveway with the plane, it might even be on the Sidewinder videos, the plane up on a table, and just moving the canopy and then walking out 70 feet to see how it looks. Now, I remember the same thing from doing Strega. See, a turtle deck canopy seems a little less sensitive to this, but a bubble canopy, boy, if it's in the wrong spot, the minute it's a quarter of an inch too far forward, it looks like a jet with two landing gear, and there's really no such thing as a jet with two landing gear or a tail wheel. And when it's too far back, it kind of look, if the rest of the plane doesn't look right, it's, oh geez. Now, one of the things I was trying to do is prevent the pilot from being right at the control horn, because if I can move him forward or back even just a little bit, I don't have to make that tunnel inside the pilot, and I thought I could put more detail in there. So that's one consideration. And you can see what really happens here is you wind up with about 1,000 variable things that you're trying to come up with. When you feel, if you feel that aesthetics are a very important part of your modeling, and I'm not going to even pretend like there's a whole world of people that it could be a flying ironing board and it wins contests, great. No problem. That we could live with that. But I want to take this to the next level, and I want to have this that when people walk by, they know it's a Seafire right away. They know, right, oh, look at a hook. Oh, canopy. Oh, yeah, look at a big spinner. Oh, not a Vico spinner. And all of a sudden, it's at another level. It's just not at the, I'm just one of 40 that are at this contest that are exactly the same. So I'm going to spend quite a bit of time checking out the book. I know there's a lot of good pictures in the book, and try to make an estimate of how far from, and again, what's difficult about this to do is if you could just take the photo enlarger, it would be easy. But you know what? If you photo enlarge it, the wing is not this large, the wing is not this high, the nose moment is much longer than a standard plane. So what happens as you make the nose moment longer, what happens is the canopy comes further forward. So that normally the pilot is sitting on a real one right over the trailing edge of the wing. Well, if he sat over the trailing edge of the wing here, that's what you would have, and it would be totally not scale. So again, this is one of the things. This is one of the reasons I've spent a couple of $100 on books. I've done a lot of research, done a lot of looking and checking and calling, and I'm so happy when other people in the event are interested in this stuff too, because without it, there'd be, it would not be as much fun as when you have a bunch of people that are either building something semi-scale, or like Uwe Degner's building something with a Spitfire wing over in Germany, but at least you have some different, somebody out there joining you in the quest. It's like climbing Mount Everest, and you have somebody at least flying by in a helicopter watching you. Anyway, I want to get the books out. I want to take a look at this, and I want to really firm up in my mind exactly where this canopy is going to go, because the next logical step is to tape on the top block and figure out exactly, and don't forget, when that canopy is slid back, the front part will stay there, so we have to take that into account too. It's not as easy as it may seem on the first shot. It's not like you walk by and you say, oh, yeah, no problem. But the beautiful part is once Bob Martens has these plans finished, everything here is duplicatable in about a third the time it normally takes to do this. When you do this the first time across the Atlantic Ocean, it took Lindbergh a whole day to fly. Now you can fly in 6 hours because everybody knows you can make it. It's not the same. But that's what I want to spend the time that I have left today on. Possibly the single most critical thing on this plane anyway is that canopy. And boy, believe me, I have spent oodles of time making the molds. Midgley has spent oodles of time making the canopies. George Enott has spent oodles of time making the pilot. And now, to get it in the wrong position, oh man, that would be disappointing. Now keep in mind, here's the problem. The thing you face is you want the illusion of a semi-scale plane. Well, the pilot can't really sit exactly over it. In fact, he sits behind the trailing edge of the wing. The reason is our wing is bigger than scale, and the nose is longer. So the combination of a longer nose and a bigger wing would make the pilot sitting on the rudder if we did it with a photo enlarger. Can't use a photo enlarger. It has to be an interpolation. Now again, the scale pictures are only good as a reference because the Spitfire, Seafire, either one of those planes has a relatively, in percentage terms, a shorter nose and a longer tail. Now here you can see it's exactly the rudder situation we have, exactly the canopy situation. The except the wing is twice as wide, and our nose is twice as long. Probably twice is an accurate number, too. Now, as far as if we were making a total scale model, the pilot would be sitting over the trailing edge of the wing. Probably, if you use this reference, this rivet line, he's just ahead of the trailing edge of the wing. But again, there's so many things on doing an interpolation, and if you're doing a semi-scale plane, you have to use interpolation. You really can't take a whole lot of the plane and photo enlarge it. You have to do it like a cartoonist would draw a picture of who knows, President Nixon, you know, and it isn't really scale, but you know it's President Nixon. That's the challenge, and because we're not making a scale model, we don't have to. Nobody's going to scale judge this thing. We just need it to look from 10 feet away, or when it's flying more than anything. Hey, look at that, a Seafire. Again, if you look at this, the pilot's head is almost right over the trailing edge of the wing. And you might think, you know, and I wouldn't blame anybody that's never done this for thinking, oh, geez, he's wasting a lot of time on this. Holy mackerel, he could have had the whole thing painted. But you know what? If you put this canopy back too far or too, believe me, it's going to look putsy. Oh, man, when you're done. I remember that Sidewinder. It made me nuts to get that canopy there. But when I did and I put the plane down after the final finish was on it, I said, yes. Now, I know from the last time I spoke to Joe, he's very excited about doing one of these desert paint jobs with the brown and 2 shades of brown and some exotic markings. I think some of the planes had yellow and black invasion stripes. Knowing Joe, I'll really be looking forward to seeing his final version. It really will be exciting. And as far as I'm concerned, the Seafire, Spitfire series of planes is one of the most attractive. All the lines are curved and angled, the rudder shapes, the wing. Everything really looks like it's chiseled out of stone, like a beautiful statue. And the thing I tried to capture on this model is the thin back of the body. I don't know if I've really captured that, but the canopy. More than anything is that when you look at it, it really has the look of the late model Spitz. I'm just looking at this too and seeing, look, the blisters. We have the blisters, the cannons. This really will be, when this is all finished and put together, I hope this is really going to be special. Another thing that's cool, and I had thought about another touch, is because we have our gear legs a lot closer in than we did on a Spitfire. It'll be a lot more scale. Those doors are going to go up into the invasion stripes. Maybe even Joe will agree to we'll put the invasion stripes on the gear legs. I don't know. That's certainly an option. I remember at one time we had gotten some pictures from the Battle of Britain Museum, and they had the original. Now, anytime one of the British airplanes had this P written on it, that's a prototype. And even Frank McMillan didn't know the Martin Baker was all yellow on the bottom. And then when we were out at the Nats and looking at Keith's beautiful model, he had brought us up to snuff on some of that, and he certainly is an authority on everything. He really does know his stuff, and the model was beautiful. But the yellow bottom, that's one of the things I've thought of. Even that would be, hey, look at a nice scoop here. And this one has blisters on the bottom. I didn't see that on any other model. Anyway, just one of the other choices you have here. I will be using this picture to try to simulate the back of that seat. I can see a real good view of the back of that seat. I also can see the shape of the mirror if I really figure some way of improvising that mirror into the program. Again, this view you can really see the outline, the bulletproof glass in the front of the cockpit. A good picture. Good picture for the cannon details too. Maybe some good detail we can steal off of these photos too. Kajeski just showed up with 2 really macho nice crutches. I want to put a little close up of these. Now I'm just trying to figure, you put the 1/2-inch wood in here side to side.
Right.
I'm just trying, these are the 3/8 by 5/8 mounts. Then you get to the tank shim part, and you put 1 grain going this way,
Right.
1 grain that way, and 1 grain front to back, so that you don't misunderstand. It's the top piece. Actually, the only criticism of this, Mike, if you did this over again, would put the second piece, put the grain this way, and then the third one grain this way.
Right.
But the grain going front to back. You're never going to have the force going front to back. But now I just want to show you what a 2 Pro Cardinal, which now they have to be attached to 2 Pro Cardinals. That's the problem. Okay, and Bobby Sabatino called this morning. He's going to be coming over to make a nobler body soon. So there's some nice work there. I'll tell you, you're worth every penny I'm paying you. Look at that. That looks good. Always, it's the inside corner, and I'm going to check these with my 10 or what the hell a test motor is or anything. Where's a test motor, Mike?
My house.
Mike's got the test motor. But anyway, it's this radius edge, so when you look at it from the front, you don't wind up catching that little tang that's on the bottom of the motor mounts on either on Super Tigers or whatever. Just to see, we don't have it. Mike's got the test motor by his house, but let's see, line up the holes. This is the light double star. See, the light double star is just a little bit longer. So if you were going to make an interchangeable plane, the way it is, to make it with the Tiger, and then make a spinner back plate with a little balsa ring on it. Don't make it that you have to cut the nose off the plane to put the other motor in. Anyway, we still didn't get to run this. Adam Usko hasn't had time. Still on his job search. Anyway, that's a really nice part, Mike. That's definitely good. And we'll see how Sabatino's fuselage comes out if we ever get him over here. Got to get him working. Okay, the little bit of time I have left here, it's not a great day. We found out that Lou Walgast, good friend of mine, his father had passed away, and the wake is tonight, so I don't want to get involved in anything too heavy. But what I can do, I just kept fooling around laying this canopy out in several different ways. And what I want to do, I want to lay out the at least roughly where the hole is going to be for the pilot, and I think I can get that accomplished without a whole lot of problem. I want to be, again, that whole thing of it, he really, in a scale thing, would be right over the trailing edge of the wing, but I think with all the compromises I have to make, I think that's going to be the closest one. Step one is I'm just going to trace this out with a little pen and just roughly cut out the little spot that I hope will be ultimately be the pilot opening. Well, I always like to lay things out with tape first. The tape, what it actually does, I can move it, I can adjust it, I can get it centered, I can move it back and forth, do whatever I want to do. Then when I'm kind of happy with that being exactly what I want, I can lay in a pen line, I can pull up the tape, get a brand new blade, and then cut that piece out. But if I just cut it without having a tape or a pen line, I don't know, sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. This seems like a little safety factor. Number one, we're right in the way of the cross bracing that we put in front of this. So the first thing is I'm going to have to get that cross bracing out of there. Get all this out of there. See, I didn't know where the pilot was ultimately going to wind up sitting. But this has to come out. Problem is, from this point on, this top block is getting increasingly delicate and vulnerable as we make it more and more susceptible to taking a whack. Now it looks like I'll have a good amount of room here, actually more than I thought I would, to get the pilot. I'll only have to gouge out the back of his side to get the pilot in there.
Hey, not too bad, Artnowski. That's pretty good. Georgina knows what the hell he's doing, huh?
Anyway, that's only the first part. Now see, a lot of this that's going to happen now is going to be determined by dry fits. For instance, the pilot's head can't hit the cockpit. I can't have my sliding mechanism for the cockpit itself. I can't have that interfere with the pilot in some way. But just to get a rough idea, I mean, right now that looks like that's going to be at least in the doable range anyway. I don't know. I walk all around and I keep looking at what I can do to get all the rough fits before I go any further. Now, from looking at the various books, again, it looks like there's a simple back to the seat, which will be a flat piece of 64th plywood, I guess, and this little piece that comes straight back. Now, simulating that will be kind of easy. It has some holes in it, and it looks like it has some kind of an antenna or something there. I don't know what that is. I need to get a picture that shows that closer. But I can make the back of the seat as the first thing, and make this. Both of those pieces I can make right now.
That's right, make me a decent seat.
Okay, step one. Let me take him out. Let me make up a template for the back of this, and I'll make that up with an IBM card first. Make up a little template for the back of this seat. I ought to put some tape on this block to hold it in place. I want to make the seat go down far enough, because the push rod is going to be in the way. I'm going to have to put a little channel in the push rod, but then come up here. And the whole idea is, if I can make this out of 64th plywood, it'll actually function as a rib here too, and stiffen up the body to some amount. So it'll not only go along for the ride, it'll serve a little purpose. So if I just roughly measure up how wide I need this, I know I'm going to need a spot about that high. It's going to have a top roughly even to the top block. Now what I need to do is just roughly sketch in, and this is real rough, what I want this to look like, something like that. Now the whole trick is to fold it completely in half. Let's see if we can do this accurately. Fold it completely in half and rough cut it out, and I should have a mirror image on the other side. I was reading in the book just today how when they went to the bubble canopy Spitfires, which basically started production in '43, what a tremendous advantage it was that the pilot could look back and see who was attacking him. Now I'm just looking down at where the arrow shaft is. I'm going to have to make an allowance that cut for the arrow shaft. Okay, now from this pattern I can see I have the width right. What I need to do is just extend this down. I want it to actually touch the floor so it acts as a reinforcement when I finally do get to glue this. So I need to just measure this with a machinist ruler, add that amount to it, and then duplicate this part in 64th plywood. Now see, part of this whole thing, I guess part of any model making, part of anything you're trying to construct, is always to make up a pattern, make it and you know in which areas it's got to be longer, shorter, wider, thinner. Now I know this has to be considerably wider, so what I can do now, I can trace this out, add in this material, and then when I go up, just trim the final piece. I really should only have to do this once, but this then will act almost like a former. It actually, instead of just going along for the ride, it'll do some work. Now if you go far enough back into modeling or into stunt, you'll remember that there was a time when virtually every plane had a cockpit. And I guess those skills, you know, they're not lost, but certainly a lot of people have taken what amounts to be a lot easier way out. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but we want to go back and recreate those, what I'll call the traditional, traditional, yeah. Anyway, I don't think you're going to see the bottom of this, but this is a good way. Actually, just making up patterns is almost a lost art here. Leave just a little bit extra material around here. Now I can take a Dremel tool, because the Dremel tool with a sanding drum will just get me in there with nice clean edges. Now I need to get as much clearance around that push rod. I don't want to have any interference with that push rod. I want to leave a little extra so I can maneuver these parts around at the last minute when this gets finally installed. Now I'm checking to see I have plenty of clearance around that push rod. I don't want to take any chances. And I'll leave this just a little bit oversized. Now I want to make this so it actually is the back of, I need some clearance here for my sliding canopy mechanism. This would have a curve from looking at the pictures. One of the things I'm going to do is I got to make an accurate template up for Bob Martens here so that this can be included on the Seafire plans. One of the things you can always do is take the original piece and mirror image it to see that you're not losing it. In other words, if you put it on there one way, since this is made from a 90-degree piece, you can always reverse it to make sure you haven't lost or the amount that you're not happy with there, which this looks okay. And this looks like a final part. Now once it's dressed off, I don't want to glue anything in. I want to make all this up so it's like just pieces ready to assemble. I'd like to paint them ahead of time if I could. Again, I'm kind of improvise as I go along, but each time I make a piece up, I will make a part for Bob so that he can put this and include it in on the plans. I want to radius these edges off so that this becomes like a semi-finished piece anyway. Next piece I want to do, I want to look at the books. Let's get the trash out of here. Simulate this little piece, and it looks like it's almost a straight piece, a triangle, so that should be real easy to simulate. Get the rough edges off this. Again, more 64th plywood. This is the material of choice. This stuff is real light and it's real strong. When this is glued into position in a rigid way, it's very strong. I just want to mark which is the back here. The reason for that is I'm only going to paint the side that you can actually see. And I believe, I can't really tell from the pictures, I'm going to have to look at some more pictures, that there is a little bit of a headrest up here for the pilot, but I want to make that little triangulated piece next. That's the piece that goes from the seat back into the fuselage. Okay, now I just want to take and make me up a little cardboard template for that little piece and get a little trial fit on it. Okay, I can see that's too big. Okay, that looks like about the right size. Rough look. It has 3 holes. And I made a little, I'll give this to Bob, I can actually use this. But to get these holes into the plywood, one of the tricks that's worth using is use a grindstone with a point and burn them through. If you go to drill them, burning them through always makes for a real nice part. The trick that's worth its weight in gold is before you take and cut the part off, drill the holes in first. Otherwise you're holding this little thing in your hand and the drill is, the grindstone's shaking, and much easier to burn the holes in first before you cut the part out. That's a real good tip. It's kind of a grindstone tip, and this is one that I use for sharpening my chainsaw, but you can see that it's all burned up from burning it through plywood, but it does leave a nice round edge. Look at the spacing on these holes. It's not equal distance, that's for sure. I don't know if that's too big or what. Now I can't really tell if I got the hole spacing exactly scale looking, but it certainly looks close enough. Okay, just a question of cutting it out now. Again, from looking at this, I don't know if I got the holes as scale as I possibly could, but if I'm unhappy with this later, I can always remake it, of course. It only takes a second or two to make it. Okay, again, nothing is glued in yet. It's all dry fits. And it's always good if you can to make as much of it in pieces, paint it and everything ahead of time, and glue it after you're all done. What I want to do, I just want to make up a little balsa wood pad like a headrest. Some of these World War II fighters, I've looked through all the books and I can't really see an accurate depiction, but I know they all had some kind of a little pad for the pilot's head. Rough this out and then radius everything in till I have, this is the outline of the seat back, and get an idea of that's pretty much what I want. Now this photo here shows the best depiction of that headrest that I can find. 3 holes in the triangulated piece and a headrest. Well, by the way, this has the modern gun sight, and that was one of the big improvements in the Spitfire Seafire series. Toward the end of World War II they had, and I just read about this the other day too, doing all this reading, about how accurate this gun sight mechanism was on the planes. They actually dialed in the wingspan of the plane into the gun sight to get it to sight better. Interesting, as all things are, very interesting. Okay, got that piece out of the way. What to do is accumulate all my loose parts in an area. I want to save that piece that I cut out. I don't know if I can make something, seat, dashboard, back of the seat. It's a nice piece of wood, and we know, actually it's one of the things I'm hoping I can use it for something, but I haven't figured out what though. Have the back of the seat, have the little triangulation done. So what I want to do, I want to lay out the plywood here that's going to be actually become the mechanism that slides the canopy. Now, I'm really almost out of time, but I can take the tape off, take the block off, and I want to measure. The cockpit is going to have to slide from here, and how many inches it's going to slide back, and I want to line the inside of the block with the shell with 64th plywood. You can see I'm going to have to cut a little bit of a notch in the pilot's back here eventually when I eventually glue him in. But his hand conveniently clears the push rod. Boy, that's just perfect. It's almost like I planned it that way. These are the kind of things, hey, don't cut my back out. Hey, my back doesn't itch. Anyway, I've got it marked now exactly where he goes. And boy, I'll tell you, I never stop admiring George. That is some pilot, baby. He is really somebody special. Look at even the shine on the glasses, like he's got the shine from the glass there. Pro stunt. That is professional. You bet it's professional, you Pollock. Now there's a time, every time I build one of these, I get to a point where I'm going to glue the top block on. I look around, I make sure most of my work is done inside, and I always think to myself, I want to dedicate each plane to somebody who has played a very special part in my life. Now, last year, John Pothier, I can't imagine anybody that's done more for me than him. Very, very few people have put more time and energy into upgrading my life. Anyway, and John, basically, again, thanks a lot. So many other people. Dave Midgley is one, who eventually will get a plane dedicated to him. Big Jim, of course. John DeTavio's already had one. George Venturini's already had one. But so many people have contributed, I guess, bits and pieces into my life. But the person I'm going to dedicate this project to is Harold Price. Now, Harold Price, for anybody who doesn't know, really, when I was a young kid, had no father, and basically was out stealing hubcaps and robbing cars and who knows what. Whatever was cool that day. He took me and another guy named Carl Wahlberg under his wing, and he gave us a real good lesson in how to build and fly and finish and wet sand, and took us to contests, let us drive his car when we didn't have a license and whatever. And I think it's appropriate that this plane, because of its intricate canopy detailing, I think he would have really been proud of that. I think he would have been proud of the Spitfire or any of these planes. He had a true love of modeling. I'm going to nominate him for the Hall of Fame this year, and hope that Win Paul doesn't make an ass out of himself again trying to write love letters to everybody. But I think he's really a deserving person, at least he is in my book. And if you've benefited from the finishing technology that I've passed along, it's probably because you've gotten it through me from Harold Price. So maybe you in turn would think about saying a little prayer for Harold or whatever is appropriate. I don't know. What I do know is this will be a fitting tribute to Harold. And I will, for sure, right now put the inscription in by the bell crank mount where I normally do it. The idea being that nobody will ever see that. That's kind of a private thing between the people that share my life with me, kind of an intimate thing. And I really think it's a very special thing. Now, there's certainly a whole lot of other well-deserving people. Tom Morris comes to mind as just one of the person that have had a real positive influence on my life of helping me build the models that I've always had in my mind's eye, and supported me through good times and bad, really, when you come down to it. But for this one, this is going to be a Harold Price plane, and we'll get out the ink marker. And Harold, if you were alive right now, I think you'd be down the cellar here, and you'd probably be saying something like, sand it some more, it's too heavy or something. But boy, we miss you, Harold. Believe me, you are missed. Now, this may seem like a pointless emotional thing to a lot of people, but believe me, it isn't to me. I remember a lot of things that Harold did that inspired me, especially being a young kid from the ghetto, you know, being exposed to somebody that was a genuine human being and a genuine good modeler, an excellent modeler. Harold, we miss you, baby. To tell you, Harold Price was one very special person, and the things I remember about him, they lasted a lifetime. It didn't die when he died, that's for sure. He was one special person to me. Anyway, Harold, the Seafire is now your possession, and you better make it a good flying plane. I'll go down to your grave and... Okay. It looks like I had a lucky guess when I put the formers in. I have them right about where I really should have them on this piece. But I want to lay out a piece of 64th plywood. I guess I'll lay it out right up to the former. I need to be able to slide this an amount. And I need to have it go from one end to here to the other. So maybe I'll take this former and move it back so I can have a little bit extra plywood there. Let me see. Now I want to get this, in fact I broke the biggest part out. Again, one of the things you can see on a video is when you're doing a prototype plane, there's a lot of back and forth. Actually, you waste a lot of time just going back and forth doing this. But once the plans are there, and you know the plane flies good, and you know what the given weights are and everything else, boy, building the next one is a piece of cake. And that's why we spend so much time with Bob Martens especially, to make sure the plans are accurate, to make sure they're right. Anyway, I'm going to lay out that piece of 64th plywood. I'm hoping 64th plywood is going to be enough of a support that I can slide that back and forth. But you can see this block gets pretty vulnerable and pretty complicated in a hurry here. Not even sure up to this point if this is going to work at all. But if it doesn't, you can bet we're certainly not going to go and erase the video. What we're going to do is learn something from it that we can hopefully pass on to other people. Anyway, I can just lay this out. From looking at this, again, I'm trying to estimate how long this piece should be. Really, we got it way to hell too long. See, this is why I have to check it every step of the way. Really, right about there, I'll be fine. Something I didn't analyze this right. This is going to start here. Roughly here is where this part is going to wind up being. That's the front of the part that's going to move. The support is probably going to end about here. That's going to give me that much support. So what I need to do is get it to come back all the way back, because that's where, you see how much I was off by? So what I'll do is extend this back. It's a good thing I checked it. Luck. It just didn't look right. That support needs to go back a lot further than I thought it did. So in fact, I'm going to make it just a little bit extra, because what I noticed on the plans is, the plans of the real spit, the real Seafire, what I noticed, and it's funny, is you can see that slot sticking out under the canopy in almost all the photos. So I want to simulate that slot even. I'd really like to even have that slot be prototypical. And by doing it now, I have brass and I have aluminum pieces of this, but I really would like to do as much of it with plywood. This canopy will add an extra ounce and a half to the plane, and that's why we're trying to keep it light. But I would like to add as many details as possible, and if I can keep even the weight of the details down, even better. Again, I want to leave this sawdust on here so that I get a good bond with the soft balsa. You see, who owes Windy money? Send them hate mail. Don't sign it, just send them hate mail. That pamper list is handy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, all these people send me bad bouncing checks. This, you have to deal with this woman eventually.
Elsie Avenue.
Elsie Avenue, yeah. Lay this out. These are going to be the internal supports. Of course, the grain's going front to back. It'll add a lot of strength, I'm sure, too. I want to lay it out in such a way that it's going to go to the front. I want to get it far enough forward. I can get it up just a little bit. But what I want to do is mark this so I can lay this out with fixed CA roughly. You need to mark one side. Now I can glue. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put some glue in here. This is slow drying fixed CA. At the same time, I'm going to put a little bit of dust on here. Just sand this lightly so I get some dust, and let the dust kick off the slow CA so I can get a good grip on it. Okay, now obviously I'll just make sure this is dry. This stiffens it up quite a bit too. See, this block is really getting flimsy at some point in time. I'll do the same thing on the other side, lay it out and glue it in. I'm going to make sure this is all kicked off. This is probably all I'm going to get to do tonight. It's time to go to the wake. Jimmy's due here momentarily, so let me just clean up the shop and we'll pick this up tomorrow. See, there's even a little spot up here, a little ridge, like where the pilot would go, and I can of course cut that around as I need to. But what it'll be is the pilot will actually be touching plywood, so I can get a good grip there rather than just going into soft balsa. Oh. Okay, this morning I had several ideas in the course of thinking about this canopy that I wanted to try, and I've tried to eliminate all the ones that I thought were maybes. But one of the ones that's always been in my mind is I'd like to make as much of this mechanism out of 64th plywood as I possibly can. And I think it will be strong enough. Now I'm just trying to, and I've been looking at this for a couple minutes, come up with exactly where this is going to, in other words, this is, the front part of this canopy is going to be roughly here. So that means on a scale Spitfire, the slot ends about at the end of the canopy, and you do get to see some of that slot. So if I divide that distance in half, that'll mean the canopy can slide back exactly the right amount. So that's the calculation I have to make now, is to get exactly the distance from here to here, divide it in half, and that'll be the part of the canopy slider that sticks out and attaches to the canopy. I always do. I like to lay things out in tape just to get an idea roughly what I'm talking about here. I put a dot up here to try to figure out. This is going to be the front of the slider mechanism. This is going to be the back. So between these two dots, roughly 1/8 of an inch up, is where I want to cut my original slot. Now with the tape, this just gives me a rough idea of where this, what I'm going to call a slot, is going to be, because I haven't really figured out exactly how I want to do this yet. Again, this is real easy to do in your dreams when you lay around thinking about how you want to do this. It's a lot easier to do it that way than when you actually have to do it. But anyway, laying it out in tape I think is the easiest way. Now that will become the slot for the slider mechanism. And of course I'll do the same thing on the other side. And this is just the thing where you almost have to invent things as you go along here. I don't know that this is really even going to work the way I had envisioned it. But I know one thing, it's easier to lay this out. Now pretend I had this glued to the top of the airplane. This would be a really difficult thing to even cut the slot. In the meantime, I want to do as much of this without having a block glued in place, if possible. Again, it's always if possible because you never really know what the limiting factors are going to be here. But I don't want to add more than 1 ounce to the plane with all these little bits and pieces, and I think if I can do this with plywood, I think I have a chance at getting it. This isn't the canopy that I'm going to use. This is one of the rough ones. But the first thing I want to do now, because I want to start getting a realistic position of just how far in this is going to go, I want to trace this out. I need to take some material off here, Just roughly work this in. And I can do that with a Dremel wheel. Now here's one of the reasons I saved that little piece. It gives me a nice little template to use for getting that final cut in there. And again, if you cut this with a scissor, you really don't get a real nice edge. And I can pretty much use this. And we should always save all these little cutouts and things. That'll be close. Just to give myself a little reference line, so this doesn't keep changing place, I laid that on there and got just a light line drawn on there. That'll give me a little reference as to how far forward. What I want to have is I don't want to have the canopy sliding too far back or too far forward at the same time. One of the ideas I had, and there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee any of this is going to work. What I wanted to do is be able to cut this line. Now from laying this out and looking at where it's going to reside, I need to be below this line. So I want to be maybe right in the center of this as where I put the final cut. I made sure that the plywood was sticking out far enough. And the reason for that is as I push down on this canopy, I want to be able to hide the mechanism. The mechanism on the real plane resides in this lip here. So by lowering this down, and this is the way I like to lay it out ahead of time, by lowering this down, I'll set up my tool that I use to cut hinge slots, that old Bob Martens thing, set this up and see if I can cut a perfectly straight line right in this area. And that in itself will be a big help. If I can get that line in it, then I can start to look at exactly where this is going to line up when it goes on there. Again, you think most of this stuff, just when it's done, it looks so easy. Oh yeah. But when you go to do this, laying out all the things, boy, and when I used to watch George Venturini lay out tile jobs so that the tiles would end in even tiles and half tiles and grout lines would line up, I used to get mad. I'd say, geez, the guy's wasting half of the day laying this out and tiles aren't getting glued down. But when I saw how productive it was to lay everything out ahead of time, and the thing then is after the plane is all buffed out, I can put the canopy on. If I glue this on now, how do I get in here and finish it and buff it and polish it? Oh man, what a nightmare. With this way, I won't have to glue the canopy on until I glue the hinges on, if this works. This is where I'm going to set up the tool, just as if I was going to cut hinge slots. Same setup. And this is the old tool of choice here. We're going to give this a try first, an old parting wheel. Now the setup for this is pretty much going to be the same as, and of course we've had this on video enough times. I'm going to have to find a way of confining this so I can run the slot right down the parting wheel. Okay, now I can just set the height on the tool. Now what I need to see is how much I can draw this down. Now see, the thing is I can draw this down. Right, obviously that worked okay. We pretty much do the same thing to the other side. Here, this shaft is so worn out. Even Bob Martin says he heard it on the video. Hey, I have a new shaft. I'm just too lazy to install it. Anyway, it looks like this side didn't cut all the way. I'm going to have to cut this over again. But it's okay. Rather than cut too far and then maybe break the blade, it's okay to do a double cut. Now I can just come back in here and cut this again. Sucker really burned its way through there. Anyway, it did make a nice neat cut. Now, I've already anticipated that when I glue this to the fuselage top, the carbon fiber will be right underneath it. So I'll be gluing plywood very near carbon fiber. It should be pretty strong anyway, even though this is very vulnerable and weak now. I always have to remember that not to let go of the tool or it drops right on the floor when you pop it out. Now this is one of the little tools I've used over and over again. It costs about 10 cents to make, and it really can add a dimension to your modeling. Now this is just one new way we've used it. Obviously it works perfect on hinge slots. This is just one more way of using it. I actually make a test piece to test how strong this is going to be. Obviously 1/64 plywood is not going to be strong enough. So and I want the grain going from side to side, most of the grains, not all of them of course. So I want to leave a little dust on this. Next thing is I want to lay out a bunch of these little carbon strips. These are the Bob Violet. I can't even pick them up. Now one thing you notice, these have tremendous strength side to side, but no strength at all in that dimension. So if you laid it this way, it would have no value at all. So carbon fiber only has strength in one dimension. So I want to lay out a bunch of strips on this, and then I want to take a second piece of plywood. Again, this is just a little test piece, and this may be too thick, too thin, too strong, not strong enough. But I figure if I can contain this, I'll have a good chance of making something that'll have a lot of strength from side to side. Again, this is more of a prototype piece than anything else, so if we're not happy with it, the world is certainly not going to end. And this is slow CA, of course, so I have a little bit of time to work here. Now remember, I want all the strips going from front to back. Almost doesn't matter if there's little gaps in between. This will certainly be strong enough to hold on the canopy. Remember, we're trying to build the strength from side to side, not front to back. And that's where if you have unidirectional stuff or plywood, you can always favor the grain in the dimension that you want to use. And what this will in effect give us is a little piece of material that we'll be able to bond to both sides. It's always easier to bond to the plywood. And let's let this kick off. As it starts to kick off, I want to, there you son of a gun, it didn't kick off. See that? And let it kick off. Now, come on! Boy, this glue, unbelievable. Okay. Okay, now that the glue finally kicked off, this really is pretty rigid. 2 pieces of 64th. I imagine in this dimension here, it's really strong. Okay, now what I want to do, I want to strip this off in 2 pieces.
When I'm far away from you. What a push, what a push. You know, Jimmy, I walked into a fruit store the other day to buy 2 apples. The clerk says they'll cost you $2 a piece. I said, okay. So I gives him a $5 bill, and as he was about to give me my dollar change, I said, keep it, we're even. I stepped on the grate coming in. Who will be with you when I'm far away, when I'm far away? One hasn't got time.
That looks like just about the thickness I'm going to need.
All the way all these few
I'm trying to cut up some pieces to put on the outside of this that'll kind of make it just a little more scale. I don't know if these are going to work yet. Take these up, the easiest way is to run this piece of plywood the same way we cut the slot there, or in this case you can even cut it by hand, but put the slot in first and then cut the piece off. Always a lot easier, and that is a good tip. Pieces really are delicate. 64th plywood, grain going front to back. I'm just trying to be real gingerly careful. The easiest way that I know to do this kind of an operation is tack it in one end, press this as you go down, tack this end. Now I want to make sure I'm going to take a piece of sandpaper and slide it through this folded up paper to make sure I have the grooves lined up. And what this will give me is, when I'm all done, see, that's just a little bit up. I want to make sure I'm not blocking the slot in some way. And I don't want to tack it up at this end. And once I'm satisfied that that's in nice shape, then I can glue the whole seam. I want to make sure I have that slot in real good alignment, and that those pieces I made fit in here with some reasonable accuracy. I've soaked this whole thing with thin CA a few times and sanded it down, so it should be relatively stiff. And it should add a little bit of stiffness to the body too. At least it's not totally going along for the ride. Now what will typically happen at the end of your final fit, you get the slider in there. It'll slide the middle real easy because it's bowing. You have that little bow developing because this isn't attached to the fuselage. But, and don't forget, this is really a hole cut in the body is what this is. So I want to be sure that having these outlines with plywood, it'll put back the strength that I'm missing. Now see, this is getting a little tight at this end. Let's just see if I can. Getting this clearance right now is important. That's good. Up here it's a little tight. It doesn't want to go the last little bit. Good place for the old machinist ruler with some sandpaper. Get in there and now it took a little time. That took a long time, longer than I thought it would, to get the clearance right. So this would be a nice tight fit. See, it doesn't fall out. It's a good clearance, but not so tight. I don't want it so tight at the ends that it spreads it either. Now what I need to do, the next step here, is to make up a little piece on here. It's going to be on an angle, but what I want to do is try to make a tongue and groove. I don't want to make because this is going to go past the pilot's shoulder. I don't want to make a 90-degree butt joint. I want to make a tongue and groove. Slot the material and slide this right in, almost like a furniture joint. Looking at this, I can see it's almost a 45-degree angle that I'm going to need to have. Now, the first thing I thought I was going to be able to do, I took a piece of aluminum tubing and split it with a parting wheel, and then I put this in there. But what happened, too much of this was sticking in by where the pilot's shoulders would be. I wasn't happy with that. So then I tried to bend the piece up, thinking I'd get a lip on one side and maybe that was all you would see. But it still was too thick, so I kind of abandoned this whole approach. The next approach I'm going to try, and I'm glad this didn't work out. This gluing aluminum to wood is never really a real solid way to do it anyway. What I want to do, I want to get a joint in here on an angle. So what I'm going to do, I got some lollipop sticks, some of these popsicle sticks. I want to take the popsicle sticks and glue them in an offset angle and then grind it to an angle. And maybe just be, most of all, is get the joint that it's not a butt joint. from working on furniture and refinishing furniture, I know you try to make a butt joint, forget it. You need everything kind of a dovetail-y deal if you want maximum strength. And believe it or not, I don't want the weight on this to add up either. I don't want these parts to start turning out to be solid steel or something. And you want to glue hardwood. The best way to glue hardwood if you're going to use CA, these are just those things that go in popsicles or fudgicles or something. I had these from mixing epoxy from last year. And leave the dust on. That's the whole key. Leave the dust on. Now the second piece is going to be offset. And I really feel like the more I think about this is going to be the best way to do this. A little labor intensive, but everything in this project's labor intensive. Okay, now you can see these are offset. I glued the two popsicle sticks on kind of on an offset angle. I'll go to the saw and trim this off. Now the next part of this, I have to go over to the belt sander and get the angle and get the exact angle of the side of the fuse in there. Now the next step I want to do, I want to get a piece of that Bob Violet carbon fiber and lay it right on the edge here. See, now that gives me a tongue and groove joint just like a typical piece of furniture. Joint in your table or chairs. Yeah, come on, you sucker. Now what I'm really trying to achieve here is to make this piece on the edge as thin as possible. So what I'm going to do is hand cut with an X-Acto knife or a Dremel, whatever's the easiest. Just slice this down so in effect this will become like an offset I-beam piece. Okay, now you can see the angle that I have in there. Now what I want to do is slide these into the fuselage. I made up the other one off camera. And make sure I have this angle that it's not in there cocked one way or another. These will then be the sliders. Now you can get a little idea of what I had in mind here as far as the canopy. Now I have to build something on this side that's going to actually contain the canopy. And then this will be, let's hope it will be the mechanism. This is one of those can your beer do that things. This is difficult. Now I just did a little sliding back and forth to make sure I get these both moving equally, and of course I don't want anything extra inside because I don't want to chop away half of the pilot's shoulder to get these to slide back and forth. It took a little bit of sanding to get these to both come forward exactly the same amount. I was a little concerned about that. I was a little concerned about not having enough clearance as I push it all the way to the back. I don't want to have it that it spreads it and splits it, so I've been working that joint with a little bit of sandpaper and trying to get a nice tight fit, because once I slide it back, I'd like the pressure of that piece of plywood in there to be the thing that contains it. Not that it's jiggling and sliding all around like jello back there. I want to lay out next, and I still don't know exactly how I want to do it. I want to get a little piece of the lollipop stick on the outside and on the bottom of this while this is in place, and without gluing it to the original part. So let me see if I can carve up a little piece for that. So the thing is, I want to get just a strip of it on there. Let me strip off a piece of this. What I want to try to do is I want to get the finished edge, not the edge I just cut with the saw, the finished edge up on there. The trick here is not to glue the thing in place, because obviously I can't put WD-40 on that. What I did, I stripped off, I've been doing this 2 or 3 times already, I stripped off some of this lollipop stick material, and I put an angle in it, a bevel, which I hope is going to be the bevel that closely matches that. So what I need to do now is trim off a piece. I'm only going to get one piece out of one slice out of each one, so there's no point trying to keep it in the middle. I don't know if this is going to be exactly what I want, but I won't really know until I finish. I want to put a little tiny bead of glue on here, but not so much that I wind up getting it, gluing a piece in place. Make sure I don't have any on that edge. Make sure I have the piece in all the way. Now here's a miracle, it didn't glue itself to the piece. Now obviously what I need to do is make the same thing on the bottom, but much thinner. Now I need to make this piece oversized, of course, and then I'll trim everything flush all at once.
Somehow the wires have to carry that cross. Don't wanna hear about
it. Now once I get the other side done, then I'll block sand this right down to the thickness, and I got to figure out the spot exactly that the canopy will be gluing to that. Maybe even get some small rivets or something in there too. Now if you lay the canopy over here, it almost goes down at a 90-degree angle. So what I'm going to do is get a sanding drum and just try to trim this off at a 90-degree angle for the whole thickness of the piece, and get it to bevel right down even with the last piece. I really had a real adventure here. What happened is, I was trying to put an extra layer of glue on here, and I glued one of these into position, so I broke it loose eventually. Had some great demise to myself here, but what I decided to do is take a little carnauba wax. I don't want to use oil, because what will happen, the oil will get down in there, and then I won't get paint to stick to that slot. With this, I can probably get some, when I go to paint it, I can probably get some paint to stick even to this with a little M600. But in the meantime, I'm going to take that whole slot and try to just get a little bit of the wax on, just so I have a fighting chance. And boy, it was amazing. One drop of that CA gets into that slot, and boy, it's a mess. I really should have done this right in the beginning. See, this is the kind of stuff after you have a little A little mini tragedy, then you wise up. Okay, that's much better. Be a little cheap insurance anyway. I wanted to finish this off by, I thought I had a great idea, but it really didn't work out as well as I thought. I was going to take a block and put a little angle on it so that I could hold this in position and get a final angle on these things. And what it turned out is because the block isn't attached to the fuselage, it didn't work out to be as accurate as I thought it would. But I did get to at least get them even in almost every respect anyway. Now I'm almost ready to get this glued in position onto the fuselage. So what I want to do is get the table pad set up. This has an extra coat of thick CA. I put some carnauba inside, and these are sliding pretty realistically. And then we can start actually dropping pieces in on the details. Okay, I'm just taking a final look inside the fuselage here. Make sure all the joints are secure, that nothing's gotten broken since the last time we worked on it. I dressed off each one of the edges with some fine sandpaper and left the dust in place. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to do the same thing I did on the bottom. Up to the leading edge here, up to the forward leading edge, I'm going to use slow drying epoxy, and then little by little work my way down the edge with the thin CA, and then on the back with some thick CA. So hopefully by tonight I can put this away and the top block will be on and we'll be looking good. Let's hope. You never. Now, same as on the bottom, I want to give myself plenty of time, so I'll use a slow drying epoxy where the one tube is twice the size of the other. So give me about 45 minutes of working time here. Mark on each side of the fuselage where I'm going to end the epoxy joint. And from this point forward, it'll be epoxied on.
Well, they give me all kinds of advice.
See, when you have the shell, you only really have to glue the edge here. Because if you had a block, you'd have that unevenness. We know this is nice and even. I want to see if I have a good footprint to glue on all sides. Looks like I got it all.
I just have to let it go. I just have to let it go. And it seems like the door.
Now I just want to, this won't really make a big difference, but as long as I'm going to do it.
Must forgive me.
And this tends to get just a little messy because the way I like to do it, I like to wipe everything with my bare hands. I like to have the feel. I know I'm getting a good bead of glue up here, especially up in the nose.
Get to see the sunshine. Get to just feel the moonshine. It is like a friend of mine.
Now whatever extra glue is on here is going to ooze right out anyway, so it really doesn't matter. I get the last little bit of this glop off here and we're ready to join this right up. Nothing beats the finger. I don't care what anybody says. The feel of grimy epoxy over everything. do here is I'm putting a couple of pins in just to hold the alignment. All I'm doing is making sure that it's a sealed area in here. Of course, I still have to put a former in here, and I want to make sure this is a sealed area. That's the number one criteria right now, under by these blind nuts and everything. Now, by leaving it upside down like this, what happens is what I always do, first off, I leave the glue so I can see it's starting to go into cheese here. This is starting to just get real thick and gooey. So now I know if I flip it over, what's going to happen is any spots that the glue is all dripped down to the bottom, they'll kind of reverse and go back to make me a nice, hopefully a nice solid joint, a nice sealed joint. I'll get a former in there. Let this dry with all the pins holding it in, pins, tape, even if I've put more tape on there. Just let that dry for an hour or so. I'll come back to this a little later, and let's hope that's going to be nice and solid. Now what I did, I started at the front. The epoxy's kicked off. I ran the seam down with thin CA, but I still haven't made the back solid, because what I want to do is make sure that no matter what happens, I don't get the rudder on cocked off to one side or the other. So I've been checking, and I just tacked it in place, and I want to make sure the hinge line in the back is not crooked. Now it looks like we're lucked out on this. Not that we ever luck out on any of this stuff. I get everything that I'm satisfied with it. I just take some slow dry and thick CA here, run a little bead. Now we're running out of time today, of course, but this was a good day. We did get the alignment done. Alignment, the top block in. I'm thinking alignment again. This gives you a minute or so to think about it and hold it in. Now say if it did need a little tweak now, you could still hold it to one side or the other. Now there's a couple of spots where there's a little more of a gap, 1/16 of an inch or so, and I'm just filling it in with the thick CA. I also have to make up a little balsa block up here, a little piece of scrap. You find out if you use the thick CA and you use it in very thin layers and don't use kicker, just let it kick off, you'll have a nice, really neat, easy to finish fillet in there. Okay, the last thing I have to do here, all these little fillet pieces came out just fine. I need to get a nice soft block and cut a little plug for each side here. You can see I have a little triangle shape that still needs to be filled in. You can see that little piece right up in the front there. I'll just get a little piece of scrap. See, I'm getting paranoid about having these things glued in place. With that episode before, this one got a little stiff. Maybe I got a little glue down in there. This one's still moving nice though. Anyway, pass that information on to you. You make a gizmo like this, every step of the way make sure it's free. This one is really not moving the way it should. Anyway, we'll free that up later. I want to get these little pieces made up, and that's going to be it for today. I made up a couple pieces that are a little bit too small. Now as I make the final piece, this one was too small too, I want to put a little bit of an angle on it so it acts like a cork, and then whatever sticks out will be sanded off. Just get a little bit of an angle on it. And a handy way to do this is to just probe it in there with number 11 blade. Now whatever sticks out, it's not relevant because we're going to sand this all flat tomorrow when we get down in the shop. We just really want to pack that hole. In fact, I see I can make this a little bit better. Trim this off. Well, that's definitely it for tonight. Everything worked out well. Just got to free that guy up tomorrow when that epoxy sets, get all that sanded in, blended in, double glue the seam, and we'll be ready to start putting all the little details in the pilot. So I just let these little things hang out. That'll get all block sanded in tomorrow. I'll block sand the hinge line here, make sure the rudder, all the joints on the rudder fit. And I guess we can start after that getting all the little seats and knobs and pilot knobs and everything in there. Kind of exciting. At this point it really starts to become an aeroplane. Now today I want to get this edge sanded in and double glued. It'll hold everything nice in position while I start to put the cockpit details in here. And it's a good idea to seal where all these pinholes are with thin CA also. Some of the heads break off the pins. You need pliers to get them out because they're in plywood or hardwood. But usually this really gives the nose some good integrity. Every once in a while what I do is I forget and I run the pliers right into the balsa wood. What I usually do, I put my thumb down on some part of the model that's solid. Use your thumb as a fulcrum. Now, I'll dress this whole edge off. Same as I did the bottom, no point repeating too much of this. Get the joint sanded, go back over it with thin CA, and then go over it with some real fine paper. If there's any little glitches or spots, hit it with a little bit of DAP. And get the joint finalized before we go on to the next part of putting this cockpit all together. Now a lot of people like to leave this go to the very end. I don't know, I like to do, as soon as one joint is ready, I like to sand that joint and get, so that the model's constantly, in a state of as much of it can be sanded as soon as possible. It just seems like it's a little bit nicer working this way. Now see, as I take the pins out and sand this down, the thin CA, as you do the second and third coat, the thin CA goes in there and acts like little nails in those little holes that you've driven into the hardwood. So it even makes a little bit better of a joint, almost like little staples or whatever you want to call. Now what I usually do, I let the thin CA, especially up on the nose here, especially on the nose, let the thin CA dry up normally. Try to avoid using kicker. When you sand it out, leave the dust in those little pinholes, and that gives it even more of a bite. Remember, what you're trying to do whenever you're trying to make a glue joint is maximize the surface area. When you maximize the surface area, you're getting 3 or 4 times the same way you're getting on a pleated filter. You're getting more of a surface area, so the joint should be a lot stronger than if you just have 2 flat surfaces touching each other. And sometimes this will take 2 or 3 coats because the thin CA is going out and hardening up the soft balsa so that I can blend maple, plywood, and balsa into one surface that you can't even feel a joint. And then of course we'll fiberglass it. And the idea of the fiberglass really isn't to make the nose stronger, but to make it more durable to people doing this, picking up the plane all day. One of the other things that's handy about you doing this kind of a system, having a pad up waist high is handy, at least for me anyway. Also, being able to take the flaps and elevators off, a big fat guy like me can get right inside here. It makes it a lot more convenient to get these edges final sanded out. And I'm always getting somebody calling me saying, well, what's the best way to do it? Well, it depends what you're more comfortable with. If you're comfortable, I like having a model up on a bench like this, and I like being able to work right up here. If you like working on a kitchen table or something, it's different. This pad, the stifle pad, and having it up in the air like this is really nice. Now, having that tube I don't know what we use this for, to make the cannons. That tube is just about the right diameter here to get my fit for the hinge line. I'm having a reverse curve fit, trying to be a little bit more scale than just having the hinges stick out. Then we spent all the time on that rudder. With all his final fits here, I can finally, let's get this down, I can finally get this final fit in here on the bottom of the rudder. And it looks like, and it's always good to do this better. I've had the rudder just maybe a 64th bigger than it has to be. So I can just dress that off here, because then we'll get the last coat of silver on there. That'll blend right in. See, it's always good to make the rudder just a little bit bigger than it has to be, because that final thing, once you have all the blocks installed and final sanded, you can get this little angle put right in.
Always around me. Night underneath the prairie moon.
And of course, when I'm done, I'll have to re-radius the bottom of this, seal it with some thin CA. Now, I want to share this with you. I've been speaking to this fella over the phone. He calls me from Italy on a pretty regular basis. His name is Clementi Capi. He's on the Italian F2B team. He sent me a really nice letter, which I'm going to ask to see if Larry can put in Stunt News. It's really it's too long to put on the videos, but the pictures that are going to go with the article are really nice. Now, this is his plane, needless to say. Now, I know this is going to make you make you sound crazy. This plane has a fiberglass body. Wendy, you've been outdone. Anyway, I didn't realize, and I have spoken to this fella so many times on the phone, he never once mentioned he had a fiberglass body plane. Anyway, the 62-inch span, styrofoam wing, OS 4-stroke, 12.5, 5.5 prop. He has two more of them here, and I'm just going through a bunch of pictures now. What he's actually sending me, and it's going to be part of the article for Stunt News, that he did crash the plane. So let's get a little look at. I guess he thinks that I'm going to feel sorry for him. Believe me, I know what this feels like. It's not fun. Anyway, what he did, it's too long to put this on. I'm just going to run through the video. It's a very lengthy article of how he cleaned the pieces up, de-oiled them, made foam replacement parts, made new doublers. It's going to appear in Stunt News, but these are the pictures. You'll get to see them in color. Re-engineering up on the front. You think Wendy's the only guy that crashes, or whoever. And little by little by little by little, you can see it's starting to take shape. Almost looks like when we did the Griffin, the nose, or the construction of the nose, putting all the pieces back. Here's the tank box. All the pieces put back together. And last but not least, the coup d'etat. It's all back. Bob Robertshaw, eat your heart out. Anyway, thanks, and I will pass this on to Stunt News. Thanks a whole lot. One of the things I did here, I made a little improvement. Bob Martens is going to kick my ass here. I made an improvement. This is an excellent tool. But while I'm working up near fillet areas, whenever you're working in a 90-degree area, you don't want to have, you want to have a rake. I don't know what, yeah, I guess a rake is the right way to put that. I raked all the edges on the block sander. Now, it was really important when I was digging around in here, because I was beating the hell out of that. Now I can get right in that corner. I also wanted to get in around all these little areas. And getting around there, you can see. I just wanted to show this up on the tape, because to me it was a significant improvement, at this point, when I'm working with edges, now I haven't obviously started the fillets yet, I want to sand back here, and you can see this has to be trued in. I want to maintain that straight edge, of course. I want to maintain, now usually what will happen is all through the construction from this point on, I want to check that I'm not losing any of my alignment. That looks pretty good, because what will typically happen when you dope the fuselage, the wood will kind of get soft one way or another, and you can have a tendency to pull that out of alignment just a little bit, but this one looks pretty good so far. Got a couple coats of fillet coat and thin CA on here drying up. That's where I had to true that up so it would be a real good match with the bottom of the fuse. Now, as long as I'm getting all this area at the back of the plane sanded, I figure I'd lay in the fillet with the thick CA. So again, this is where it's real handy to have this up an edge on here. It can get right in the corner. Clean that edge up. And then I just want to get a band of thick CA. One layer of thick CA, or just lay it in there, and that's it. Now with that edge on there, it's real handy. You can get in some creases and corners and things that you normally can't get in. I usually just scuff up the silver just enough. Okay. Again, thick CA, one layer. If you get this technique down, fillets go very quickly. Let it sit for a couple of seconds. Take the smallest finger you have, or the end of your nose or something. 2 layers will give you a little bit thicker fillet, but because I don't want it to kick off, the stuff that goes out onto the wood is no problem. It'll harden up the wood. That's it. Fillet done. Just take some 60 grit paper. As soon as that kicks off, obviously if you put kicker on that finger, you are in big trouble. You'll set your finger on fire. In fact, Joe Ortiz set Peggy's foot on fire already with CA. Anyway, clean that off. This is good if you want to rub a bank too. You get rid of the fingerprints. Okay, and I'm ready to do the other side. Once that stuff kicks off, you really do need to scuff it. If you put dope over CA that hasn't been sanded, and I use 220 here, what will happen? It won't really stick well. You need to scuff it up. The idea of the sanding is not really to radius it or anything, but to give it a tooth, a mechanical tooth. And the only reason I'm doing this is because I'm working on the back of the plane here. I like to clean the whole back of the plane up and then get working up by the cockpit here. I don't know what there is about this, but I always feel like if I finish one part of the plane, one area, while I'm back here, in fact I'll flip this over and do the bottom fillet too. But anyway, so far so good. Yeah, that feels fine. Now I'm going to need, there's a little divot in here, I'm going to need a little spackle, I can see that. I don't want to make this any thinner than it has to be back here, but I can see there's still a little divot in there. Now the only little suggestion I have is don't go down, see, once you can see the silk span, that's it. I'm just trying to get that edge real nice so I can do this in one or at worst 2 coats of CA. If you don't get it smooth on the first shot, just sand it and put another coat on. By the way, I've checked this out relative to the weight of epoxylite fillets, which several people have told me they use successfully, but I have never gotten something done with epoxylite that I was happy with. The old Bud McKnight sanding stick even works well here. It's one spot that always makes me crazy when I can't get it right. It's right up in the front here. that reverse curve, because as people launch the model, they always seem to be able to feel if you didn't get that. I've launched other people's models and said, yeah, doesn't this guy have sandpaper home?
Any other man stops and talks, but the walking man walks on by. Walk on by.
Now here's a great little tip. You know, you always have where you poke, after the plane is in silver, you poke the hinge through and that paper around the edge always gets a little ratty. What I've been doing the last couple of planes is fold a piece of sandpaper in 4 and just hit each hinge pocket just a little bit. And you see the little stuff that comes out of them? The little pieces of paper come floating out. Now once I get rid of that paper, what I do is, and this is a tip, one of those tips worth its weight in gold. If I only wish. Soak a Q-tip with CA, and it's even better if it's old CA. It doesn't kick off right away. And after you do the first one, it's going to develop a little point. We're closing in on having the back of this plane buttoned up here, so. Now you'll like this. I was flipping the model over, and I'm sure this happens to everybody. And this ball that's hanging from the ceiling here, right into the tip weight box. So I did what amounted to be get this area hardened up and some filler coat on it. I also put another coat of CA on these. I'm going to let this dry, sand it down, and I'm pretty much finished up. The back of the plane, I still have to spackle those little divots in there, and I don't know why. That they just have one little spot on each side. But the idea is to, as you're going around now, start picking out the bad spots. Start picking out anything you're not happy with, you're not comfortable with, because we're closing in on it. Tell you, my wife comes home and she tells me
The day's over. Get up here and eat.
or whatever we have to do up there, and she knows how to bribe me. Check this out. Remember these when you were a kid? Barnum's Animal Crackers. I gotta tell you, I've been sanding this thing all day, and it's almost the end of the day right now, believe me. If you were a kid and you had these, believe me, eat your heart out. They're excellent.
Hey, what about me? How about an animal cracker for me?
Shut up, you criminal.
I want
Get to fix this little divot area. And right about at this point in time, every time I see a little glitch or something I can fix, I like to do it on an ongoing basis. I don't like to wait till the end and then have to do a whole plane all at once. Now, always best to put this as ordinary spackle, the same stuff you do sheetrock work with. The light stuff that's supposed to be real good, and I tried and used. Many people have had trouble with the fillets lifting, so I kind of favor this. You can use a rubber trowel. I like forcing it in. Now, this is going to wind up being just a small amount. And as you're forcing it in, it starts to actually get thicker and thicker. Don't do what I did years ago. I was making tradition and I had the hatch in, ran the fillet, couldn't get the hatch off. Anyway, I like this idea of doing this on an ongoing basis. I got a couple coats of filler already on that wingtip where I ginched it.
As the moon rises, he sits by his fire.
Now I got a little bit of time left in what I want to do. I just want to tack glue things in position here. Now these can still come apart. I want to make sure all my fits, just one drop of glue will get this in position. Again, this is the part of the thing that's just going to take a lot of time now, and I'll probably spend a lot of time tomorrow figuring out exactly what needs to get cut off, not cut off, how I'm going to make the canopies. You can see over there we haven't even dyed or cut the canopies yet. They're sitting there ready to go. So there'll be a lot of stuff coming up here. But the next thing I really need to do, and it's probably going to be kind of time consuming, is just Make sure I need to trim some of this away. Make sure all this stuff is going to fit. And I don't want to paint it. I don't want to glue it. I want to get everything like a dry fit. It's so important to understand what a dry fit is. A lot of times you go and glue this in and you say, oh, if I could only get the paintbrush back there. If I could only get the glue gun back. Oh man, it makes you crazy. So I'm going to go with a lot of dry fits. I'm just going to sit and see if I can lay this out for the rest of the time that I have tonight. Now after looking at how everything kind of is in here in what might be this almost permanent position, one of the things, of course, I got to cut some of this away now. So I laid out the canopy previously. I want to take maybe 3/8 of an inch off of here and then get a look at how it's going to be when I lay out the dashboard.
I'm nothing to see.
What we're going to do, I figured out the amount is roughly 3/4 of an inch, so I laid out some whoops, hey, Bonzo, they're eating too many animal crackers. And then I want to just step this up a little and trim this out, and I can use a little ruler here too, but this is a good way to get a line, get a rough line as to how you want to do this. Otherwise the thing is always going to be crooked in one angle or the other. Now with that little piece we put, I want to leave this here because I don't know how I'm going to detail the sides. But now I can, whoop, come on Putsy. Now I can actually lay out the rough shape of the dashboard. To do, I did this with the Dremel tool, but what I've been doing is little by little, just filing out the notch in the back. I want to give myself plenty of clearance on the push rod. I'm probably going to have to do the same thing on the front. Now this allows me to set the pilot deeper in or raise him until I finally get the final spot that I want him to rest in. See, now this is what's handy about having everything tack glued in or just laying in there. You can take it out because the next thing, and this is about the end of what I'm going to have time to do today, I wanted to make up a cardboard pattern, and of course you have to make one up in this case. Now I can just put a dot on where it needs to be a little wider, needs a radius on the bottom. But I can pretty much make up that pattern, and probably in tomorrow's session I can start laying out the instruments. That'll be nice. Getting excited about this guy. Once I have a rough pattern, I know, for instance, this is going to come out to these marks. So I know I can kind of sketch that in, leave it a little oversized. Then I drop down. And I know it was a little wider than it was. Can kind of drop down, add a little width, and then I know the bottom of it has a curve. So I can kind of estimate what, just roughly, oh, President Nixon's going to end my day here. Alright, we're probably going to pick this up, pick it up later. Coming! Answer the phone, you bum! I hear you. I've just gotten the final warning that it's time for supper.
I don't want to have cold bread.
I don't care. See you in the morning. Now this morning, we're about at the end of this tape. And we're going to pick up the cockpit on the next tape. But one of the last things, I don't know how many times I've mentioned this, whenever you put spackle, real spackle, like sheetrock compound, whatever you want to call it, one of the things you have to remember is it always shrinks. So you always put one coat on, like I did yesterday. Today I'll put another coat on. Now it's first thing in the morning. It's a good idea to put that on right away. And while I'm making up the dashboard, the instruments and everything, this can be drying out. Always good to put it on in a lot of thin coats. If you ever did sheetrock work, you notice you go over the nail holes, the next hour, day, or whatever, it shrinks right in. If you put a big giant glob on, it just cracks and doesn't work real well. So the trick is always, first thing in the morning, get whatever amount of spackle you need on there. Let that start drying off. Usually you just need one shot of the sandpaper. It sands as easy as pie, actually. But I really want to get started on that dashboard today. I got the pattern roughed out yesterday. It'll really be nice if I can get this cranking along. You know, I've tried a lot of other materials, Model Magic, I think you call it. Lightweight, tried for several years to use lightweight spackle. Nothing is better than ordinary sheetrock compound. It's a little bit heavier, but the paint seems to stick a whole lot better.
Okay, Erdnowski, the video's over now. Come on. Go make me a dashboard up. Change the tape in the machine and go make me a dashboard up. Okay, we'll do it, Mr. Bill.
Anyway, see you on the next tape. Thanks for joining. Thanks for joining.